All right. Hey, my friend, and welcome to this episode. And so I just wanted to make a short little episode for this week because I know that there's a lot of turmoil right now. I know many of us had a hard 2020. So there's obviously some great things that still happened, but, it was a tough year. And I think many of us were putting our hope in the idea that when that calendar turned to 2021, that things would be better. And the reality is that it's been, we've been off to a rocky start. And so I want to just talk about the idea of hope, right? And hope is something that we can't ever let go of, right? Because the moment you let go of hope, your behavior, will just immediately follow that, right? And there's always things to be hopeful for. Now, maybe your candidate won in the election, maybe he didn't. Right. And either way, that is one of those things that is just the reality. Okay. And if we are focused on the past, right, because this is where a lot of people's stress comes from, right? It's past based and future based, right? But if we're focused on the past, on an event that we didn't like, and we are, continuing to be upset about that, and we've exercised all that we can do about that, well, then eventually what it's going to do is just eat us alive, right? In a similar fashion, if we're looking into the future and predicting all these horrible things, that also can, really, really mess with us as well, right? That's where anxiety comes from, right? It's, our brain future pacing an unwanted event, right? And then us reacting to it right now like it's actually happening. And, I guess the thing that I just want to say is that as we, go into this week, look, remember that we are all in the same boat together, right? And one of the things that I know that happens is that media will look to divide, right? And the more and more we divide, the harder and harder that is to rekindle, right? And if you look at any relationship, right, like I've done much counseling for, just couples in general or relationships. And one thing that I've learned is that when you stop communicating, then that becomes the breaking point, right? And even if you have differences of opinion, you can still communicate and communicate respectfully at that, right? Communicate respectfully, communicate lovingly, communicate understandingly, right? With people. Just because you don't believe something someone else believes, or just because you don't agree with someone else, that doesn't give you the right to respond in an aggressive or a shutdown kind of approach to that individual, right? And even however wild it might be, I mean, that's one of the great things about, the United States is that we have the freedom to have opinions, right? And at least for the time being, right? And, the thing that I guess that, and again, I'm as guilty of it as anyone, right? So it's like I'm as guilty to get swooped up into, like anger and get angry about stuff and all this stuff. I've had all sorts of emotions over the past several weeks. And I think once you are able to step back from that, right? And ultimately, I think two things, one, deciding on what kind of content you are consuming and what that content is doing to you as an individual, right? Because again, at Restored Minds, we have that same message that we go back to again. Healing starts from within, right? And, I know there's people talking about healing the nation. Well, okay. Well, you know what? That starts with you then. And it starts with your ability to be okay internally. Because if you aren't okay internally and if your internal well-being is contingent on something and that thing's not happening, then you're not okay internally, and then that manifests and grows in your environment, starting with your relationships, your work, all that stuff. And the thing that I want to go back to again and again and again is this idea that healing starts from within. And a lot of what happens within is going to be determined on what we are consuming outside, right? So if you're consuming negativity, anger, hate messages, right? If you're spreading that stuff, even worse, well, what's that going to do to you internally? And is that promoting healing, right? And the other thing, so starting first with what you're consuming as an individual and what that's doing to you, right? And where you're putting your hope, right? I mean, like those are big things to consider. And then the other thing is that when we want real healing to happen, what needs to happen is that you have to be the first person to open up, to listen, right? Not to be heard, to hear, right? If you want people to hear you, you got to hear them, right? And what's happening, I think there's this standoff by people on both sides of the coin, where it's just this absolute that I'm right. And anytime you think like that, that is extremely dangerous thinking. Extremely dangerous. Because if you're convinced you're right, you're not going to hear anything. If you're not going to hear anything, well, they're not going to hear you. And then the divide just starts to grow and grow and grow and grow. Now, like, my hope is that it's reached its max, right? And that the pendulum starts to swing back the other way. But the thing that I want to go back to again and again is I put my hope in the individual, always, right? Not in an institution, right? Any institution, any masses, is like I put my hope in an individual, because at the individual I know I can connect with. But when you are, it's important that if we want to heal as a nation, right, that it starts with you, and just remembering that. And what that means in all of your relationships, and going back to that. And if you can really embrace that idea, then you can start to look at yourself and say, hey, okay, well, are there ways that I can change to help this healing process? And this is what I ask myself, right, all the time. How can I change, right? Because this is where it starts. It starts with me taking responsibility, right? So if there's anything that I need to change, then I start working on that individually. I don't try to change other people, right? Because that becomes, that's where the real conflict happens. And so, I think that we all want the same thing. We all want 2021 to be way better than 2020. And we can accomplish that together. We really can. It's very possible. The question is are we going to learn from the mistakes that caused the division, right? Are we going to keep listening to the same people that want us to divide, right? Or are we going to try a new approach? And instead of looking outward, looking within and starting here and working from there. So, I wish you guys a great week this week. I know there's a lot going on this week, and I wish everyone to be safe. Again, there's no reason to incite chaos and violence in any way, online or in person. It's like, if you're not sending messages of hope, messages of love, messages of peace, messages of unity, then don't send messages, man. Look at yourself and see why you're even thinking about sending that other stuff out. And if you're one to cancel people and anything, any kind of stuff like that, you have to just step back and look at yourself. And so I guess this is, my hope that we can start to come together as people and remember that we're way more than a political idea. So if you're over-identified with any kind of political idea, that's a problem, because that's not you, right? That's just an idea, right? It's an ideology that you've adopted, that you've internalized, that you've become identified with, right? And if you really want healing to take place, we have to strip back identities that we've put on ourselves, quote unquote, and start to look at who we are as just people, and remembering that we're all people, and uniting on that general cause first, and then healing from there. And so, anyways, I just wanted to take the time to share that message this week. And again, if you guys are looking for, any kind of help with anxiety, psychological stress, if you're really struggling with any of that, we also have additional resources for you over at Restored Minds. And, if you found this video helpful, well, we'd appreciate, if you'd like and subscribe and support our channels as well. So thank you guys. And I wish you guys a wonderful week, and I will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you found it helpful, chances are someone else will too, and we'd really appreciate your support by liking and subscribing, and also sharing this video on your social platforms. Also, if you're looking for additional help, we have some resources right down in the links below to help you on your journey. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you soon.